All right, we're going to jump back in time to a really fascinating period in Japan, the Edo period. This is when the entire country made a wild decision to basically lock its doors and hide from the rest of the world for more than 200 years. We're going to find out exactly how and why they did it. I mean, just think about that for a second. Could a whole country just decide to ghost the rest of the world? No one comes in, no one goes out? It sounds like something from a movie, doesn't it? But this really happened. This is the incredible story of Japan's Great Isolation. Okay, so here's our game plan. We'll start by figuring out why Japan closed itself off in the first place. Then we'll see exactly how they did it. After that, we'll take a peek inside this bubble to see what life was like. And finally, we'll see what it took to finally open the doors again. To really understand how serious Japan was about all this, we're going to start with a pretty shocking story about some sailors who had some of the worst luck imaginable. Okay, let this sink in. You're a Japanese sailor. Your ship gets wrecked, and you wash up on some foreign shore. You'd think you'd want to go home, right? Wrong. You were forbidden. The government believed that you had been contaminated, basically that the outside world had changed you and that you might bring back dangerous ideas. This wasn't just about keeping people out, it was about keeping Japanese people in. So, the big question is why? Why would a whole country do something so extreme? Well, the answer really comes down to one person, Japan's powerful leader, the Shogun, and his deep, deep fear of outsiders. All right, two quick definitions we really need to know. First, the Shogun. Think of him as the top dog, the most powerful military leader who was really running the show in Japan. Under him were the daimyo. These were powerful lords who controlled their own chunks of the country, but they all answered to the shogun. This whole power structure is key to understanding everything. So, the shogun had two huge fears that kept him up at night. The first was weapons. He was terrified that his daimyo, those powerful lords, would start trading with Europeans, get their hands on powerful guns, and then try to overthrow him. His second fear? A new religion. Christianity was spreading, and he worried that if his people became loyal to a Christian god, they wouldn't be loyal to him anymore. For the shogun, both of these were a direct threat to his power. With these fears fueling him, the shogun didn't just politely ask foreigners to leave. Oh no. He created a set of incredibly strict laws to build a giant wall around Japan, both literally and figuratively. And when I say strict, I mean it. First, all foreigners had to get out. Simple as that. Second, no Japanese person was allowed to leave the country. And to make extra sure of that, they made it illegal to build big ships that could actually cross an ocean. And we already know what happened if you did manage to get out. You could never, ever come back. And finally, to stop new ideas from seeping in, they banned foreign books. And these weren't just guidelines. If you broke any of these rules, the punishment was death. That's how serious the shogun was about cutting Japan off from the entire world. Now, the lockdown wasn't 100% total. The shogun left a tiny little peephole open to the world. A very small number of traders from China, Korea, and Holland were allowed in, but under super strict conditions. The Dutch, for example, were stuck on a tiny, man-made island in Nagasaki's harbor. Why were they the exception? Because they made it clear they were only interested in trade, not in spreading Christianity. The shogun was even smart enough to use this little window, ordering Dutch scholars to study Western science and medicine to keep Japan from falling too far behind. So, what happens when you stick an entire country in a bubble for a few centuries? You might expect things to just stop, but actually something pretty amazing happened. Japan entered a period that many now call its golden age. First, let's just let that number sink in. 250 years. That is an incredibly long time. For generations upon generations, the only world that Japanese people knew was the one inside their own borders. So, what was life actually like in the bubble? Well, it was a mixed bag. On the good side, there was an incredible long period of peace. No major wars. And with all that stability, a truly unique Japanese culture had the space to blossom. But on the bad side, it was a very rigid society. You were born into a certain class, and that's where you stayed. There wasn't a lot of personal freedom. And with almost no foreign trade, the economy just couldn't really grow. But let's talk about that culture, because it was amazing. Things like Kabuki theater became hugely popular. It's this really dramatic, colorful style of play with wild makeup and costumes. And get this, all the roles, even the female characters, were played by male actors. A new type of poetry called haiku also appeared.
These are super short poems that are all about capturing a single perfect moment, like this one. In the sky at night, stars known as the rice basket blossom like flowers. It just paints such a clear picture with so few words. Beautiful.
And of course, there was sumo wrestling. It had been around for a long time as a kind of religious ritual, but during the Edo period, it blew up into a national sport. It was entertainment for everybody, from the richest lord to the poorest farmer. But nothing lasts forever, right? After 250 years, the walls Japan had so carefully built started to crumble, partly because of problems at home, and partly because of a powerful new force knocking on the door from the outside. So why did it all end? Well, you had two things happening at once. Inside Japan, things were getting tough. There were famines and disasters that led to riots. The whole class system was getting shaky, with merchants actually becoming richer than the warrior samurai. At the very same time, the rest of the world was showing up. Countries like Russia, England, and especially the United States wanted Japan to open up for trade. The US needed places for its whaling ships to stop for supplies, and they weren't going to take no for an answer. At first, Japan tried to stand its ground. In 1825, they even issued an order to just fire on any foreign ships that came close, no questions asked. But in 1853, the game changed forever. An American, Commodore Matthew Perry, sailed into Tokyo Bay with a fleet of huge steam-powered warships. The Japanese called them the Black Ships, and they were terrifying, like nothing they had ever seen. Perry delivered a letter from the US president demanding that Japan open up. Then he left, saying, "I'll be back for your answer." And when he returned the next year with even more ships, Japan knew it had no choice. They were forced to sign a treaty, and the doors to the country were finally open. The long period of isolation was over, but that leaves us with one last massive question. What happens to a country that has been living in a bubble for over 200 years when that bubble is suddenly and violently burst? The answer to that question would kick off one of the fastest, most incredible transformations any country in history has ever gone through.